Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the UFFS Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports Podcast or vlog, or if we want to call it a video cast, we'll just call it a podcast for today. Delighted to have on the show today the Director of Communications and Content for UFFS, which is also Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports. For those of you out there that don't know what it stands for, we've got Larry Fisher with us today. Hey, Larry, how you doing?
Doing good. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to talking some UFFS.
That's what we like to talk about on the show, and that's what we're going to talk a lot about today. But I'm going to tell you, I was going to wear my Boston Bruins jersey on this show, but I thought I'd focus on the UFFS brand today. I thought the Boston Bruins thing might be a good luck charm to get us into talking about NHL and Stanley Cup. I don't know what it is, but I'm a big Bruins fan from way back, and I wouldn't have shown you the Marchand in the back because some people wouldn't have liked the dirty rat thing. But all that aside, we're going to focus today on the UFHL, which is the hockey platform, up and running, of course, and awaiting so very patiently, Larry, for the resumption of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And I know that you're well-versed in the goings-on in the hockey world and what's happening out there. And there's a lot of talk. Like, I don't know if we're in, I don't follow it like you do. I don't know if we're in stage 2 or stage 3, but where are we at? Is this real? Is it going to happen? Tell me about this a little bit from your standpoint, in your opinion.
Well, they're back on the ice, so that's the first step, right? They're doing small group workouts of 5 or 6 players at a time. They got the ice back in and they are skating. The training camps are scheduled to start on July 10th, so that's sort of the phase 3 when all the players move back to their NHL cities and go into full-on practice training camp. And then from there, the next step is obviously to get games going and to move into the 2 hub cities. It sounds like Vegas is going to be one of the hub cities. All the players love Vegas. There's obviously no shortage of hotel rooms and entertainment there, so it's perfect. The rink's right on the strip, so it's perfect to be set up in Vegas. So that's going to be one of the host cities by all accounts. And then the other one is looking more and more like it'll be a Canadian city. They're just kind of delaying the announcement. Possibly June 22nd is a date that they're going to announce the second hub city. And Edmonton, Vancouver, and Toronto all still have active bids among the Canadian NHL franchises to be the second hub city, and we should find out for sure before the end of the month what the plan is there. But those games would start, I've seen as early as July 29th, which is a Wednesday. I've seen the August long weekend. August 1st is a Saturday. That would be a nice way to come back with the Hockey Night in Canada, or the big Saturday show, and maybe have all the playoff teams, all 12 games, because there's 24 teams in the playoffs. Or sorry, there's 8 teams get a bye, so there'll be 8 games, but potentially have all 8 games on that first day and do a big launch on August 1st and the August long weekend. But there's also a bit of hesitation that it could be pushed into mid-August. Just again, really depends on what's happening in the world, how quickly the players get up to speed and those timelines. But the firm timeline is July 10th is when training camps will open, and from there we should have tons of hockey news to talk about.
July 10th, that's coming right up. That's only, I guess basically a month away.
Yeah, it'll come quick now. And like I said, every passing day, there should be a little more hockey news and a little more excitement to build on, both for the NHL and obviously for the UFHL on our platform as well, which we have a redraft where we're looking at. July 11th is likely the date there where the new owners will get to pick their own teams. And then one of the most unique parts of our platform is the playoff draft. So the way that works is if your franchise makes the fantasy playoffs, 16 out of 31 teams will make the playoffs. And if your team's in the playoffs, obviously you're going to have some players from NHL teams that are non-playoff teams. So you'll be able to fill those roster spots through a playoff draft where you'll draft NHL playoff players from the UFHL non-playoff teams. It's almost like a loan system. They'll loan you their players from NHL playoff teams to use in the UFHL playoffs. And if you win money or earnings and prizes and stuff in the UFHL playoffs, those players will take a portion of that back to their original team, which keeps everybody excited, cheering on their team in the playoffs as well as their personal individual players. So those are kind of the next 2 big things for the UFHL, providing the NHL takes that next step.
So it's kind of like owning an asset, right? So you own that asset. So you might, based on, if I'm hearing you correctly, fantasy points, you drop into the playoffs. But some of your team might not be in the playoffs, but you'll have players that'll be in the playoffs, or assets, I guess you could call them, and
Yeah,
you'll then lease them to other teams, or they'll be drafted by other teams.
correct. They'll be drafted by other teams, and you'll always have a reason to follow the playoffs and people to cheer for within the playoffs because, like I said, your assets that are on NHL playoff teams are still going to be involved in the UFHL playoffs, even if your team missed the UFHL playoffs based on our standings. So it's a great way to keep everybody involved and keep everybody interested in the UFHL playoffs, which is different from most fantasy hockey leagues where your playoffs are part of the NHL regular season. So with UFF Sports and the UFHL, our regular season is game 1 to game 82 of the NHL regular season. It mirrors it entirely, and the standings calculate just straight up rotisserie, roto. And so your points are all going to be tabulated for your 23-man active roster, and you'll make the playoffs much the way teams do in the NHL. And then from there, when that playoffs roll around, that's where you'll be able to do different than what a normal fantasy league does, which is in February, the fantasy playoffs start and you play the last month and a half of the NHL regular season is normally the fantasy playoffs. And the trade deadline gets moved up, everything else. But in UFF Sports and the UFHL, everything mirrors the NHL. So you go right to the end of the regular season and your playoffs run directly based off the actual stats from the NHL playoffs. So it very much mirrors the NHL, and it's something that not a lot of, or perhaps no other fantasy league does to take it to that level.
Truly original and innovative. That's what I like to see. That's what I like to hear. So this would take a lot of management expertise, I guess. You really have to be on the ball to manage your team if you really want to have a shot at doing something, right?
Yeah, the management side, it's much like being a franchise owner or a general manager in the NHL. And obviously we use the salary cap. All the contracts are exactly as they are in the NHL. So that's another big factor too. If you have Taylor Hall, who's going to be a free agent this summer, and he's at $5 million right now, and he signs for $10 million, well, you got to work around that salary cap in our platform as well. So it's exactly like the NHL. Essentially, we've taken the NHL and dropped it onto the blockchain and created all of these digital assets. And it's very much the role play, the gameplay is you're going to feel like an NHL general manager if you're a franchise owner, or if a franchise owner brings you into the fold as his general manager, which some of our franchise owners are more so businessmen who've got involved as a investment, and they may not follow hockey as closely as obviously the hardcore fantasy players, or they may just not have time with their business lives and stuff to oversee the day-to-day roster management. So they're bringing in general managers to the fold as well. And again, there's only 31 jobs for GMs, so it's going to be the best of the best eventually as far as the general managers and the franchise owners in the UFHL.
Well, I don't know what it is about you, Larry, but you must be reading my mind, because I was just going to ask you about that. Considering, I'm too busy in my life. I want to own a team. I really want to own one of these franchises, but man, I wouldn't be able to keep up with the day to day. So how would I get around that? Can I hire somebody or work with a manager? But you just answered my question. So that's actually a really good way of thinking about it for those that do want to own an asset that should appreciate in value over time, I would think, and can't do the day to day.
Yeah, and that is the thing. That's why they're getting involved is they're seeing it as an investment, as the franchise value is only going to go up. And if you can put somebody in that'll run the team and make trades and moves that'll get you the best players with more fantasy knowledge than you have yourself, it's a win-win, right? The better the team is on paper, the more valuable that franchise is going to be as well, because if they're the reigning champion of the UFHL, that's going to drive up the franchise value. And a lot of the businessmen or the investors, they may prefer to do the branding side, because branding, merchandise, that's all going to be part of it as well. So some people are getting involved as franchise owners because they love to come up with a team name and a logo and maybe make some merchandise and really get the business side of the operation going, much like the NHL, because most fantasy leagues, you're strictly the general manager. Yes, you make a little logo, but that's kind of where it ends. Where here, it's the potential is limitless as to how you can mimic the NHL and truly build out your franchise, which lends itself to, first of all, hiring general manager, and down the road, potentially hiring or partnering with scouts and and building in that part as far as a feeder system of talent for your franchise. So it just, like I said, the opportunities are limitless as far as being a franchise owner and getting in and having that investment and then bringing other people into the fold. And certainly you can have an ownership group as well, which several of our franchises have 4 or 5 people involved that are equal shareholders in their franchise. And that obviously brings down the cost per person. And you can still have within that committee, you can still designate a general manager and still kind of have roles. Maybe one person does focus on branding, one person focuses on the roster. There's a lot of ways to go about it and to really take a franchise on and take it to the next level.
That makes a lot of sense. Creating a community, right? You get together, have weekly beer meetings, if you want to call them that. Wine meetings, it doesn't matter to me. Beer would be my preference. But, discuss the strategy. Discuss the strategy of your team, what you want to do, your merchandise, your branding. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's exactly the way the NHL model is. Everything in the UFHL and UFF Sports, we've tried to essentially copy over the CBA from the NHL, their collective bargaining agreement, as well as we hope the owners, eventually the franchise owners will be, groups or business people and perhaps even brands or companies will get involved and sponsorships and stuff like that, much like the NHL. Every team has sponsors, and we hope to grow it as a kind of our own little mini NHL. But the role specifically will mimic what you're doing as an owner will be similar to what an NHL owner is doing, what you're doing as a general manager, including watching over the salary cap and when the NHL re-signs a contract, that contract is applicable to the UFHL as well. And you have to have that foresight that if somebody's going to get a big raise, you got to make room for them in advance, or else you're going to get caught where you have no salary cap space. A new contract's going to put you over, and you're going to almost have to give away a player because other owners and general managers are going to see that you're over the cap now and you're in a desperate situation. So that foresight and planning around the salary cap, again, you don't really do that in any other fantasy league, including keeper leagues. It's not necessarily to that level where everything mirrors the NHL. So I think that's going to be a big challenge, a big part of being a general manager or a franchise owner in the UFHL. And that's the challenge, and that's the opportunity to really call yourself basically an NHL general manager. It's on-the-job training, essentially. If that's you aspire to be a GM down the road, this is a great place to start.
I love it. The whole concept is amazing. And to be able to emulate the NHL, a game that, people and fans are insanely passionate about, and take it to the new level and become an owner yourself is pretty cool. Because let's face it, there's not many of us that are going to own an NHL team anytime soon. This is kind of like doing it, but in a lot more reasonable pocketbook. Easier on the pocketbook, I guess you would say, right?
Yeah,
Same
totally.
idea.
Totally. And still like it's a hobby, but you can treat it almost like a little side business, right? I mean, I think we've already got some franchise owners who are super passionate. I've seen the Elite Assassins especially have taken it to the point where they got stickers and bumper stickers and stuff made up to hand out and to sort of advertise and to try and get sponsors and stuff involved with their brand and really focusing in on potentially, trademarking and copywriting your name and your logo and stuff. And obviously you can put in whatever you want into it, right? And then if you have that stuff in place, that again, the business side of it will drive your franchise value up, right? So some people may come in and just focus strictly on the fantasy hockey and the roster, and you have the best roster, but you haven't done any of the branding or business side. You're still going to have a valuable product based on the roster. Other people will do the opposite. They'll build up the branding and the business side and maybe not have the hockey knowledge, and they may not have one of the best rosters, but there'll also be people that kind of get the best of both worlds, and those are the ones that are going to be worth the most, and the franchise values are going to skyrocket for the people that, again, you'll get out of it what you put into it is the way we envision it.
Right. Okay. So let me ask this. So we all know that Connor McDavid's not going to be, someday he's going to get older. You have an older team. They're aging. They're not playing up to the caliber they used to. You have to build your franchise from, a lot of times, and you're always going to have to do this from the bottom up. You mentioned the word scouts. So I'm thinking now, my mind's going on the scouting thing, where you have to always try and find talent that's out there. How can an owner or a franchise owner go and get new talent? Now, I partially know this because I have been on the website, the triple dub UFF Sports website, and I do know that they launched their fantasy scouting. So I would like to better understand that. I know there's a lot of interest and excitement around it, but if I'm an owner, can I be a scout? How does this work?
They are separate. You have to register either as an owner or a scout. You can't be both, but you can certainly form partnerships. You can get your buddy to scout and you be the owner and sort of work as a tandem. That much like the NHL, the franchises hire their own scouts. We're trying to iron out the details of how we will work that, whether we'll have a minimum entry-level contract, ELC like the NHL, to make sure that we eliminate those buddy deals where somebody finds a really good prospect that all 31 teams are interested in and maybe would be, quite valuable on the open market, but they give it to their buddy for less. But again, that partnership's much like the NHL. The teams find the best talent, and sometimes some teams have better scouts than others. So we don't want to limit that necessarily, but the actual rules surrounding scouting on whether or not they can work for owners and in what level, that is still being ironed out between now and September, when the scouting will really take off with the open market registrations, where you can register any prospect you want at any time for a minimal fee. That is kind of the future, and that's where scouts will. People ask me, well, how does this work? What is the role of a scout? And I just tell them, scouts are scouts. That's what they're going to do. Scouts are going to scout. Their job, as you alluded to, is to find the talent for the league that will eventually work its way up to be, quality enough prospects that these franchises will want them on their protected list and eventually on their active roster. And so there's a number of ways and processes for how these prospects will go from scouts to owners and how that transfer will happen. But essentially, scouts will scout. They'll scour the world. They'll watch hockey. They'll research hockey. They'll try to be ahead of the game and find the next Connor McDavid, the next Sidney Crosby. And they can recruit these kids as young, or bring them into the platform as young as 15 years old, which is the WHL Bantam draft year. And they can hold their rights all the way up until they're 26 years old, as long as they're Calder eligible, which means they've played less than 26 regular season NHL games, and they can still be property of a scout. So there's a big window there for all this potential of prospects and players out there that scouts can sort of bring under their own umbrella or their own list and really develop. Oh, it's almost like development. You find the kids and then you develop them, and eventually they're going to go through an entry auction, which the owners will purchase prospects from the scouts. And the prospects that don't go in those auctions will then almost be a free agent, but the scout will still retain the rights to those prospects. And that's where the scout kind of flips from scout to agent, and you sort of negotiate contracts for these guys to join the UFHL. So again, it mimics the real world, both from scouting as well as agents. So it's kind of a dual role, but it's again, very innovative, very unique. Nobody else has really done scouting in the fantasy world, which is kind of strange because like you said, it's such a big part of real world sports. So we're bringing it to fantasy, and I believe it's going to take off. I think a lot of scouts that are out there in the scouting community are going to see this and want to be able to potentially monetize their eye for talent.
It actually sounds pretty exciting. So at the beginning of this discussion, we talked a lot about being an owner, and that involved being the owner of a franchise. But this is a way to be an owner in a different way, owner of as many, I guess, assets or players or potentials that you see it could have potential in this platform as being a scout.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. You own the digital assets that you register or that you purchase through. Again, the scouting concept will launch in August officially. We're going to sign up as many scouts as we can between now and August. And once we got a good pool of scouts, we're going to do 2 separate scouting auctions. So the first one will be the futures, which will be future NHL draft classes. So that'll be 2021, 2022, and 2023. All the top prospects that are sort of 15, 16, 17 years old will be in that auction. Either we'll do the top 50 or the top 100 likely. And so that's where you'll get your Shane Wright and your Connor Bedard and all these next Sidney Crosby's. The top end guys will come into the scouting pool through those auctions. And then the second auction will be just a one-time thing because we're new with scouting, and obviously all the prospects that currently exist in the hockey world that are drafted by NHL teams aren't yet owned in our platform. So there's going to be an already drafted auction where the scouts can grab a Bowen Byram or a Trevor Zegras or some of these guys that were first round picks in the last couple of years but aren't yet in the NHL. They'll grab those guys in the auction, the top prospects, and then they'll kind of negotiate entry-level contract type system for them to get them onto the protected list for the UFHL franchises as they make that jump to the NHL. Because the franchises and the team owners can have 50 contracts total, which again mimics the NHL. That's the exact same number they have in the NHL. 23 on the active roster and 27 on the protected list, which is kind of like the farm team. So that process, owners will want to fill out their protected lists, and scouts will own those assets. So they're going to have to come together and transfer those and work out deals, and perhaps there'll be an auction process there as well. But the scouts will find the talent and distribute it to the owners down the road.
So obviously there's all the top prospects that every scout's going to be after. First come, first serve sort of thing, I guess, right? First one to register that potential talent on the blockchain is going to own that asset, correct?
Yeah, we're going to have annual auctions, futures auctions, which I'll probably be in charge of that, where myself and one of the other guys in the founding group for UFF Sports, we'll kind of come up with a list of who we think are the top prospects for that next draft class. So next year in 2021, we'll be talking about the 2024 kids, again, the WHL Bantam draft class for us from Western Canada as well as the rest of the world. And again, thanks to the internet, thanks to YouTube, Twitter, message boards, all the rest, those names are out there already. We know who the good 14-year-old kids are going to be. And will the kid at 14 be as good at 17 and 18? That's part of the risk that the scout takes on. But for the top prospects, they will come in through a scouting auction. The scouts will bid on them and they'll own that asset. But for all the other prospects, and there's thousands of hockey prospects in the world, and the vast majority of them won't be in that scouting auction. So like you said, in that case, starting in September, it will be first come, first serve. If you're down at the rink in Brandon, Manitoba, and you see a Bantam AAA or midget AAA kid that looks pretty good, or maybe you're at a junior B game and somebody's tearing it up, and this guy could be in the Western League next year, you go home and you spend $20 and you register him, and if he takes off and goes, that's the return on the investment. Is you find the best talent and you register them at that entry level, and then hopefully they take off and become a player, and you get return on your investment when the NHL comes calling, or in our case, the UFHL comes calling.
Again, I think you're reading my mind, Larry, because that's where I was going. I know a kid, I live in a pretty good hockey town here in Manitoba, and I know a kid down the street that I think has potential. So I could go register that kid.
Yeah, as long as he's 15 years, as long as he's 15 years old and eligible for the 2023 NHL draft. So his birthday would have to be by September 15th, 2005. That's the youngest you can do for this coming year. But yeah, anybody who's born before September 15th, 2005, if you know a kid down the street and he's pretty good and he's not on my list of top prospects, exactly, you throw down $20 and you bet on the kid basically, and you acquire him as a digital asset, and then as he works his way up the ranks, whether he goes and plays Junior A or the Western League, and maybe he gets drafted if he gets drafted in the top 2 rounds of the NHL draft down the road, then he would come into the UFHL through the entry auction, which are all the top 62 prospects every year. And that's where scouts will make, if you have those prospects, that's where you'll make your most return on investment, because you picked the right kid, and the owners are going to pay more for the top prospects every year based on the NHL draft and who the NHL feels are the top prospects. So if you have those kids, that's where you'll make the biggest margin, at least on your prospects. But again, you register kids all throughout the world that may not be in the top 2 rounds of the NHL draft. There's late bloomers. There's always steals in the 3rd and 4th round. If you find one of those kids, you're gonna make money on what you put down. And so basically you are scouting and you're betting on yourself that you have a good eye for talent, or a good network of people and good research ability, and you bring these kids into the platform as digital assets, and you control them, like I said, until the UFHL comes calling, either through the entry auction, which is same as the NHL draft, or through the free agency type thing where prospects don't get drafted or don't go in the top 2 rounds. teams are still going to want those on their protected list if they continue to improve.
So unique ownership of an asset. Nobody else owns that asset. $20 to sign up as a scout. I take a chance on someone that I see down the street that I think has talent. I own that. That's a pretty small investment if you think about it. I have no problem throwing, or a lot of people don't have any problem with throwing $20 into a VLT and taking their chance. And a lot of times that's gone. So here, I mean, this is almost a no-brainer, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a fun investment to kind of track that kid that down the street. And I think that will be how a lot of people approach scouting. There will be people who really want the top prospects, the biggest name, and they're going to target through the auction and make it as an investment to get those top prospects. But I think the vast majority of scouts, because we don't have any minimum or maximum or limit on either, you don't have a minimum amount. So if you sign up as a scout, you don't have to register 5 prospects per year or 1 per month. There's nothing like that. There is no minimum. You can do you can register the kid down the street, and that's the only kid you ever register, and that's all you have to do. So I think there will be a lot of people that sign up, pay their $20 to be a scout, and some people will probably register their own kids in all honesty, but you can spend as much or as little as you want, which that freedom is really nice for the scouting platform, is that scouts aren't forced to participate in the auction and spend big money on Shane Wright or Brad Lambert or any of these big name kids coming up that might go for a couple $100. You can turn around and sign the kid down the street for $20, register them, and see where that asset goes. And again, there's a lot of, you look at the NHL rosters, there's a lot of guys in the NHL who were never drafted or who came up through, 3rd, 4th round picks. I look at the kid who led the WHL in scoring this year, Adam Beckman, was a 3rd round pick last year. Well, he wouldn't be part of the entry auction. So he would essentially be available for a scout to grab and register. And you would have noticed him probably in October of this year. Hey, look, this kid went in the 3rd round. Now he's got 20 points in 10 games in the Western League. Let's grab him, right? So, and you can add these kids anytime throughout the year. So that's always nice too, is you kind of follow your local league or whatever, and you see a kid taking off, you grab them. And then, if the NHL is interested in that kid down the road, so will the UFHL, because they want the same players and prospects as the NHL. And that kid will return investment on what you put down. And like I said, it's a small investment, and it's a lot of fun to have some skin in the game and to really track and feel a part of the UFHL.
I think it sounds awesome. It sounds exciting, and it sounds like something that almost anyone can get involved in. And I think the cool thing about that is registering kids at that age. There's growth spurts that happen and growth spurts that don't happen, and you never know what's going to happen. You could have someone that could be a scrawny little kid at 15, 16 years old, and all of a sudden turns into a 180 or a 200-pound behemoth that is out there and just develops an amazing amount of strength that could really pay off, right? And you own that asset. So I think that's actually pretty cool. It'll be a lot of fun to track.
And there's so many examples of that. I mean, we can use Shea Weber. Shea Weber was never drafted in the Bantam draft. He he was never taken in the Bantam draft. He was 5'9" when he was 15 years old, and now he's, one of the biggest, strongest defensemen in the NHL. Like I said, growth spurts are a big part of it. Late blooming, sometimes whether it's finances or whatever in a family dynamic, kids don't get the best opportunities at the youngest age, and eventually they get noticed, and they do get those opportunities. Artemi Panarin could be a Hart Trophy finalist candidate this year for the New York Rangers. Chicago brought him over at 23 years old. He was never drafted into the NHL. He was a free agent in Russia that just kept getting better from, his draft years of 18 and 19. By the time he was 21, 22, he kept getting better, and now he's one of the all-time best, or one of the best players in the NHL. So there's all types of stories of guys, especially in the past, that have come into the NHL and never been drafted, or even never drafted in the Western League. So there's going to be a ton of kids that you can find outside of our auctions for $20 and are going to turn into something, and you'll be, again, the notoriety, you are the scout who found that kid, at least in our platform, and you get a bit of fame for that, right? It's kind of that part of it, the pride and the fame, and you'll get a little bit of a monetary return too, which is nice. But probably what means most to you is that you were the guy who went out there and found the next Sidney Crosby that nobody else knew about. And you know what? NHL teams might take notice of that too. Hey, look at this guy scouting for the UFHL, UFF Sports, he's finding these guys before our scouts are. Let's get him, let's give him a full-time job and bring him in. So the potential is there to be a good scout on our platform and potentially turn it into a career as well.
Wow, I never even thought of that aspect. So I think what's cool is that absolutely anybody can get involved in this, and it's not going to be a mess on the pocketbook to be involved as a scout if you choose to be. We talked a little bit about franchise ownership today. We certainly weren't going to get into that part on today's podcast, but scouting was the focus. Almost out of time, Larry, but I want to ask you, if I want to be a scout today, how can I sign up?
So you want to go to uffsports.com, and it's in the top right corner. There's a register sign in. You go there to the register page. We will have instructions on how to do your currency conversion, because to register it's $20 US, but you will need to pay in Ethereum, in crypto. So you'll have to do that outside of our platform right now. Eventually, we're going to build that into the platform where there'll be a currency converter right on our website, and it'll be a one-stop shop. But right now there is the third party, a couple extra steps just to get that registration complete. But once you're in, all of our gameplay is done in score tokens. So it'll be very much like a casino or video games online where you use score tokens. So the crypto gets you in the door, and once you're in, you're using score tokens, which is really nice and convenient. But yeah, for scouts, you want to sign up at UFF Sports in the top right-hand corner under register and fill in the information, and you'll be up and running once you do that $20 US deposit in cryptocurrency. You'll be registered for our scouting auctions in August, which will start likely the last 2 weeks of August. So we'll do the futures August 15th to the 21st, and then we'll do the already drafted from September 22nd to September 28th, or August 22nd to August 28th, and then September 1st, the open market. The floodgates will open on first come, first serve. Any kids that weren't in our auctions will be available for registration. So, and there is an incentive to sign up. It's, as we said, it's $20 US to sign up, but the first 25 scouts that sign up will actually get 2,500 score tokens, and you do the conversion, that's $50 US. So you're getting paid $30 to sign up, and then the next 50 scouts get 1,500 score tokens, 1,250 score tokens, which translates to $25. So if you're one of the first 75 scouts that sign up, you're actually getting in for free, and you're getting some tokens to potentially purchase or register. $50, you can register 2 prospects for that at $20 each, or bid on one of the top prospects with your $50 in the auction. So certainly get in early and give yourself that time to prepare for the auction, and everything gets going August 15th, and then really the floodgates open on September 1st.
Love it. There's way too much information here to get into in 30 minutes. I can tell you that. We're going to have to talk about this some more. So I want to thank you, Larry, for your time today. We're definitely going to get more into the intricacies of being a scout, some important dates that the people are going to have to be aware of. And obviously there's going to be more questions as people, go on the website, try to sign up, and, maybe the score token thing, just like, going to the casino and getting tokens that you have to play in the casino games. It's the same, trading money for tokens, right? It's the same kind of idea to play in the platform. It sounds really awesome. So thanks again, Larry, for your time, and we'll be talking again.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Exciting times ahead for the UFHL, and let's hope your Bruins are back on the ice and playing games sooner than later, because they had a strong team again this year. They went to the final last season, and they're looking like one of the teams to beat in the Eastern Conference. So it'll be interesting with the new playoff bracket and how that all shapes up in the NHL, and it'll be different. It'll be different than usual, but your Bruins are looking strong. So hopefully you have some hockey to watch and some UFHL to follow soon enough.
Absolutely. I hope so too. I actually heard that this COVID restriction thing's been really hard on Marchand, because he hasn't been able to get close enough to lick anybody's face lately. So he's a little bit out of practice. He's probably been practicing on flagpoles. I'm not sure what he's been doing, but he is someone that's fun to watch. That's for sure. So thanks again, Larry. Anybody out there that wants more information, there's a lot of ways to get it. You can look on the website, as Larry mentioned, www.uffsports.com. Also on Facebook, Twitter, and you'll find us on YouTube as well. So thanks, Larry. We'll talk again soon.